First steps among stars. The crystalline dome of the Centauri Racing Complex sparkled under the twin suns of Alpha Centauri, its transparent panels reflecting prismatic light across the assembled crowd of various species. Sarah Chen stood at her racing pod's maintenance bay, pretending not to notice the whispers and skeptical glances from the alien spectators and competitors. A human. In the galactic speed trials. The melodic voice of Avrexith reached her ears, their bioluminescent tendrils pulsing with what Sarah had learned to recognize as amusement. Their neural pathways are practically geological in their slowness. Sarah continued her pre-flight checks, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface with practiced precision. The racing pod before her, sleek, obsidian, and distinctly human in its design, represented 5 years of engineering collaboration between humanity's best minds and their alien counterparts. But its most crucial feature wasn't visible to the casual observer. It lacked the neural interface systems that every other competitor relied upon. Ambassador Richards approached, his diplomatic robes rustling against the polished floor. "The Council's still debating whether to allow your participation," he said quietly. "The Zixte delegation is particularly vocal about safety concerns." "They're not concerned about safety," Sarah replied, adjusting the gravitational compensators. "They're concerned about their perfect record." She straightened up, wiping her hands on her racing suit. The material, a hybrid of human and alien technology, felt alive against her skin. How many centuries has it been since someone beat their champion? 3, Richards answered. But that's not the point. The other species have evolved specifically for these kinds of speeds. Their neural processing capabilities are artificially enhanced, Sarah interrupted, which is exactly why we have a chance. They've become so dependent on their tech that they've forgotten what natural reflexes feel like. A sharp chime echoed through the complex, signaling the approach of the qualifying committee. Sarah watched as they filed into the bay. A Zixte elder with iridescent scales, a Vrexith administrator trailing light patterns, and surprisingly, an ancient, their crystalline form hovering silently above the ground. The ancient spoke first, their thoughts materializing directly in Sarah's mind. "Your species intrigues us. You achieve through crude biological means what others require technology to accomplish. We call it human ingenuity," Sarah replied respectfully. "We've always had to adapt to overcome our limitations." The Zixte elder, introducing himself as High Commander 6, cut in. "Adaptation is admirable, but there are natural laws that cannot be circumvented. The neural processing speed required for hyperspace racing cannot be achieved by organic means alone." Sarah smiled, reaching into her pod to retrieve a data crystal. "Actually, we've done some research on that. Human reaction times in crisis situations can drop to as low as 70 milliseconds. Our brains process information differently under pressure. We call it flow state. Here's our data." The ancient took the crystal, their form shimming with interest as they absorbed its contents. After a moment, they turned to their colleagues. "Their methodology is sound. The humans have discovered something unexpected about consciousness and speed." "But the risks?" 6 began. "Are mine to take," Sarah finished, "just like they were yours when your species first reached for the stars." A low hum filled the bay as the ancient processed this. There is wisdom in her words. The Council's decision is made. Sarah Chen of Earth will be permitted to compete in the galactic speed trials. The announcement rippled through the complex. Sarah could feel the shift in the atmosphere, from dismissive amusement to cautious curiosity. She turned back to her pod, running her hand along its smooth surface. The machine was ready. She was ready. "One question remains," the ancient communicated. "Why choose to race without neural interfaces? Every other competitor uses them. They are proven technology." Sarah climbed into her cockpit, the systems coming alive around her. Because sometimes the shortest distance between 2 points isn't a straight line. Sometimes it's the path you feel in your bones. As the committee departed, Ambassador Richards lingered. "The qualifying round starts in an hour." The course is a hyperspace slalom through the Proxima Centauri debris field. Sarah finished, her fingers already dancing across the controls. I've run the simulation 1,000 times, but never with real hyperspace distortions. Sarah grinned, her eyes reflecting the holographic course map floating before her. That's the beauty of being human, Ambassador. We don't need perfect conditions to adapt. We just need a chance to prove what we can do. The first warning chime sounded through the complex. In 50 minutes, Sarah would either make history or prove every skeptic right. As she began her final preparations, she couldn't help but smile at the irony. These advanced species, with all their technology and evolution, had forgotten something fundamental about speed. Sometimes the fastest path wasn't about processing power or enhanced reflexes. Sometimes it was about pure human instinct, the kind that had kept their species alive since they first looked up at the stars and decided to reach for them. The race was about to begin, and humanity was finally ready to show the galaxy just how fast they could really go. The neural edge. The hyperspace slalom course stretched before Sarah like a ribbon of twisted light. Through her view screen, she could see the other qualifying pods taking their positions, their hulls gleaming with the characteristic shimmer of neural interface fields. The debris field around Proxima Centauri loomed ahead, a maze of ancient spacecraft remnants and asteroid fragments caught in complex gravitational eddies. Course analysis complete, her pod's AI announced. Recommended neural upload ready for. Sarah reached over and muted the system. She didn't need a computer plotting her course. Not for this human participant. The race controller's voice echoed through her comm. Final warning. Running without neural assistance is classified as extremely high risk. Do you wish to withdraw? Sarah keyed her mic. Negative. Control. Proceeding as planned. She could almost hear the controller's exasperation. In the adjacent pods, her competitors' neural interfaces were already syncing with the course's quantum beacons, their minds merging with their machines to calculate the optimal racing lines through hyperspace. The first signal flashed. Sarah closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. This was what humanity had evolved for, not the cold precision of computer-assisted navigation, but the raw, instinctive understanding of motion and momentum that had once helped their ancestors chase down prey across prehistoric savannas. The second signal pulsed. Around her, the other pods hummed as their pilots entered the fugue state of neural synchronization. Sarah's hands settled on her controls, feeling the subtle vibrations of her engine's idle. The final signal blazed, and the world exploded into action. The first jump point approached at relativistic speeds, while her competitors' neural interfaces calculated precise exit vectors. Sarah felt the hyperspace distortion in her gut, an instinctive understanding of spacetime that no computer could quite replicate. She pulled hard on her controls, diving into the quantum foam between dimensions. Colors that had no name in human language streaked past her viewport. The pod shuddered as reality itself twisted around it. Through the quantum chaos, Sarah caught glimpses of her competitors, their movements precise but predictable, slaves to their calculated optimal paths. But Sarah wasn't following calculations. She was dancing. Each hyperspace exit point was a note in a cosmic symphony that only she could hear. While the neural interfaces saw safe corridors through the debris field, Sarah saw opportunities. She threaded her pod through gaps that the computers classified as mathematically inadvisable, relying on the same intuitive physics that let a human catch a ball without solving differential equations. Impossible, she heard someone mutter over the open channel as she emerged from a particularly daring maneuver. The human is still in a race. Not just in it, leading it. The ancient's voice whispered in her mind, somehow cutting through the quantum static. Most interesting, you are not simply piloting the pod. You are feeling the space itself. Sarah grinned as she executed another jump, her body anticipating the gravitational waves before her instruments could detect them. Humans have always been good at feeling our way through the impossible. The debris field intensified. Ahead, A massive section of what might have once been an ancient generation ship created a hyperspace shadow that the neural interfaces would need precious milliseconds to analyze. Sarah didn't analyze. She reacted. Her pod rolled, catching the edge of the shadow, and using its gravitational distortion like a slingshot. Physics screamed in protest, but human instinct prevailed. She shot through the final checkpoint, a full 3 seconds ahead of her nearest competitor. As she decelerated back into normal space, the quantum wake of her passage still rippling behind her, the race controller's voice crackled through her comm. Qualifying round complete. Human participant. Advances to final trials. The observation deck erupted in chaos. Sarah could see Ambassador Richards gesturing animatedly to the council members, probably already feeling protests and demands for technical investigations. The ancients simply hovered, their crystalline form pulsing with what might have been amusement. Back in her maintenance bay, Sarah ran her post-flight checks manually, ignoring the crowd of engineers and scientists gathering to study her primitive approach. A shadow fell across her console. High Commander 6. Your victory, the Zixtai Elder said carefully, was unexpected. Sarah continued her checks. Because your neural interfaces told you it was impossible. Because we had forgotten. Six's scales shifted color thoughtfully. In our rush to perfect the mathematics of speed, we had forgotten that space itself is not mathematical. It is alive. Perhaps it takes a species that still remembers how to feel rather than calculate to truly understand that. Sarah finally looked up. The final trials will be harder. Yes. Six eyes glimmered. Our champion, Zarkax, has never been defeated. His neural interface is the most advanced ever created. Good thing I won't be using one then. As Six departed, Sarah placed her hand on her pod's hull, feeling the residual warmth from their hyperspace journey. The final trials would push her to the absolute limit of human capability. But that's where humans had always done their best work, at the edge of possible, guided by nothing but instinct and determination. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the most sophisticated computer was the one that evolution had spent millions of years perfecting. The human brain, pushed to its limits by nothing more than courage and the will to succeed. Breaking point. The maintenance bay was eerily quiet when Sarah arrived for her pre-race inspection. Her pod sat in shadows, its obsidian surface reflecting the dim emergency lighting that always preceded race day. Something felt wrong. Run diagnostic, she commanded, placing her hand on the hull. The familiar hum of systems coming online felt different, discordant, like an instrument slightly out of tune. Warning, the pod's AI announced. Multiple system anomalies detected. Neural interface calibration recommended. Sarah frowned. I don't use neural interfaces. Run a deep scan of all modified systems. Ambassador Richards burst into the bay, his usual diplomatic composure shattered. The council's in an uproar. Someone accessed your pod last night. The security feeds are scrambled. Of course they are, Sarah muttered, her fingers flying across the diagnostic panel. The results confirmed her fears. Someone had attempted to force install the neural interface system. The installation had failed, but the attempt had corrupted several key navigation subsystems. We can postpone, Richards suggested. File a formal protest. Sarah shook her head, already climbing into the cockpit. That's exactly what they want. If we delay, we forfeit our position in the trials. She began bypassing the corrupted systems, rerouting critical functions through backup circuits. Besides, I never trusted the AI navigation anyway. Sarah, you can't possibly. Race starts in 20 minutes, she interrupted. Just long enough to strip this down to basics. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, disconnecting the neural interface components that someone had tried to force into her ship's systems. Pure human control, like riding a bicycle. A bicycle didn't have to navigate a quantum singularity course at relativistic speeds. Sarah allowed herself a grim smile. First time for everything. The warning chimes began as she finished her makeshift modifications. Through the viewport, she could see her competitors taking their positions. Zarkax's ship gleamed at the front of the pack, its neural interface field so powerful it distorted the light around it. Final systems check, her pod's AI announced, its voice now stripped of its usual sophistication. Warning: multiple critical systems operating in manual mode. Neural interface not detected. Navigation assistance minimal. Quantum field stabilizers manual control only. Race participation under these conditions is not recommended. Noted, Sarah replied, powering up her engines. Disable all remaining automatic systems. Give me pure sensor feed only. The AI fell silent as the final warning chime sounded. Ahead, the race course stretched through the most treacherous section of the Proxima Centauri debris field, a region where a previous civilization's war had torn holes in the fabric of space-time itself. Humans, the race controller announced, unable to keep the concern from their voice. Your pod is showing severe system irregularities. Final chance to withdraw. Sarah keyed her comm. Negative. Control. But I wanted on record that my pod was tampered with. I'm racing under protest. She could see the stir this caused among the observers. The ancient's crystalline form pulsed with rapid color changes. High Commander 6's scales had darkened to a storm cloud gray. The first signal flashed. Sarah closed her eyes, letting her other senses absorb the subtle vibrations of her ship, the almost imperceptible pull of the quantum eddies ahead. Without the eye's filters, she could feel everything. Pure, raw, and terrifying. The second signal pulsed. Around her, neural interfaces hummed to life, their pilots surrendering their consciousness to the quantum calculations of their ship's computers. Sarah's hands tightened on her controls. No computer, no AI. Just human reflexes and millions of years of evolution that had taught her species to read the language of motion and momentum. The final signal blazed. Reality twisted as the pods launched into the quantum course. Without AI assistance, the sensations hit Sarah like a physical blow. Colors that burned, sounds that had taste, movement that existed in dimensions her mind couldn't quite grasp. But underneath it all was something familiar, something primal. The same instincts that had once let her ancestors read weather patterns in the sky and predict the movement of prey through forests now helped her read the patterns in quantum foam and predict the collapse of probability waves. Her pod screamed through gaps in reality that the neural interfaces classified as suicide, navigating by touch and instinct where computers could only calculate and fail. Warning alerts flashed across her screens. Structural integrity straining, inertial dampeners struggling, reality itself protesting the impossibility of what she was attempting. Extraordinary, the ancient's voice whispered in her mind. You are not fighting the quantum chaos. You are becoming part of it. Sarah didn't respond, couldn't respond. Every fiber of her being was focused on feeling the space around her, reading its movements like a rider reads a horse. Where neural interfaces saw barriers of probability, she saw doorways. Where computers calculated impossibility, human instinct found a way through. Through the quantum static, she heard fragments of shocked commentary. Her pod was not only surviving, it was gaining on the leaders. The sabotage had stripped away the technological crutches that other species relied upon, leaving only the raw, pure interface between human consciousness and the fundamental forces of spacetime. As she emerged from a particularly devastating quantum eddy, Sarah caught a glimpse of Zarkax's ship ahead. The defending champion's neural interface was visibly struggling to process the chaos of their passage, its calculated perfection faltering in the face of quantum uncertainty. The final checkpoint approached, a narrow corridor through the heart of a temporal anomaly that the war had left behind. Neural interfaces would need precious microseconds to calculate safe passage. Sarah didn't calculate. She felt, she flew, she believed. And humanity showed the galaxy that sometimes the most sophisticated technology wasn't technology at all. It was the pure, unwavering spirit of a species that had never learned to accept impossible as an answer. The final stretch. The championship course loomed before them, a twisted path through the quantum graveyard of an ancient stellar war. Fragments of broken ships and shattered planets created a maze of gravitational anomalies, while temporal echoes from weapons that had torn holes in spacetime itself rippled through the void. Sarah sat in her cockpit, now stripped of everything but the most basic systems. After the sabotage attempt, she'd removed anything that could be compromised. No AI, no neural interfaces, just sensors, engines, and human instinct. Zarkax's ship hummed beside hers at the starting line, its neural interface field creating a corona of impossible colors. The defending champion's voice crackled through her comm. Your determination is admirable, human, but this course has claimed the lives of pilots with far more advanced systems than yours. Maybe that's the problem, Sarah replied. Too much system, not enough pilot. The ancient's presence touched her mind. The champion speaks truth. This course was designed for neural-enhanced reflexes. No organic being has ever attempted it unaugmented. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Then it's about time someone did. The first signal pulsed, and Sarah felt her consciousness expanding. Where others saw chaos in the quantum debris field, she saw patterns, the same patterns her ancestors had seen in storm clouds and ocean waves. The universe spoke a language older than technology, and humanity had never forgotten how to listen. The second signal flashed. Around her, the other finalists' neural interfaces hummed to life. Sarah closed her eyes, letting her other senses drink in the quantum fluctuations that rippled through space. Without AI filters, she could feel everything. Raw, pure, and terrifying. The final signal blazed. Reality shattered as the pods launched into the quantum maze. The first obstacle was a temporal echo, the ghost of an explosion that had destroyed a planet eons ago, still rippling through spacetime. Neural interfaces needed precious milliseconds to calculate safe passages through its fractal patterns. Sarah didn't calculate. She felt the echo's pulse, like a drummer feeling the rhythm of a complex beat. Her pod danced through gaps in reality that computers classified as non-existent, threading the needle between what was possible and what was probable. Impossible, she heard Zarkax mutter over the comm as she emerged from the echo neck and neck with him. Your reactions can't be this fast. They're not fast, Sarah replied, rolling her pod through a quantum eddy that sent them spinning into a higher dimension. They're early. Understanding flickered through the quantum static. Where neural interfaces reacted to events as they happened, human instinct anticipated them a fraction of a second before. In the quantum realm, that microscopic difference between reaction and anticipation made all the difference. The course plunged them deeper into the graveyard. Here, the debris was so dense that light itself became confused, creating regions where time and space flowed like water around rocks in a stream. Zarkax's neural interface carved a mathematically perfect path through the chaos, while Sarah's pod seemed to flow with it, becoming part of the quantum current rather than fighting against it. Your approach defies analysis, the ancient observed, their thoughts cutting through the dimensional static. You are not merely piloting through spacetime. You are dancing with it. Sarah's hands moved across her controls in what felt like a choreographed performance. Humans have always been good at dancing with the impossible. The final stretch approached, a corridor through the heart of what had once been a weapon capable of unwriting reality itself. The residual energy created a quantum storm that neural interfaces could barely comprehend, let alone navigate. Zarkax's ship pulled ahead, its advanced systems working at maximum capacity to plot a safe trajectory. But Sarah saw something the computers couldn't. A rhythm in the chaos, a pattern in the quantum static that reminded her of waves breaking on a shore. She threw her pod into the storm. Reality screamed around her as she rode the quantum currents like a surfer riding a wave. Warning alerts flashed across her screens. Structural integrity failing, dimensional stability fluctuating, probability itself protesting the impossibility of what she was attempting. But beneath all the chaos was something pure and primal. The same instinct that had once helped humanity's ancestors predict weather patterns by watching birds in flight, or navigate vast oceans by reading the stars. Where neural interfaces saw barriers of probability, human intuition saw doorways. Where computers calculated impossibility, human spirit found a way through. The finish line approach. A quantum beacon pulsing in what passed for normal space. Zarkax's ship was still ahead, its neural interface working furiously to maintain its lead. But the defending champion had been forced to slow, to be careful, to let his computers calculate each move. Sarah didn't slow. She didn't calculate. She believed. Her pod shot through a gap in reality that the neural interfaces insisted didn't exist, riding a wave of quantum probability that computers couldn't predict. For a fraction of a second, she existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, her human consciousness somehow maintaining its integrity where AI systems would have collapsed. And then she was through. The quantum wake of her passage still rippled behind her as she crossed the finish line, a full second ahead of Zarkax. In the realm of hyperspace racing, where victories were usually measured in milliseconds, it was an eternity. As normal space reasserted itself around them, Sarah heard the race controller's voice, thick with disbelief. Winner of the Galactic Speed Trials. Human participant, Sarah Chen. She looked out at the stunned faces in the observation deck. The council members, the engineers, the scientists who had all insisted this was impossible. But most of all, she looked at the ancient, whose crystalline form pulsed with what might have been joy. Perhaps, the ancient communicated, we had all forgotten something fundamental about speed. It is not merely a matter of processing power or enhanced reflexes. It is about understanding the dance of reality itself. And sometimes, the best dancers are those who never forgot how to feel the music of the universe. Legacy of Speed. 1 month after Sarah Chen's historic victory at the Galactic Speed Trials, the Centauri Racing Complex had transformed. Where there had once been skeptical whispers about human limitations, now there were eager discussions about human potential. The maintenance bay that had once housed Sarah's lone pod now served as the temporary headquarters for the newly established Human Galactic Racing Initiative. Sarah stood at the viewport, watching ships from dozens of species arrive for the first day of what the media had dubbed the Human Method Training Program. Below, her championship pod sat alongside Zarkax's, both ships now modified to run with minimal computer assistance. Your victory has sparked quite the revolution, Ambassador Richards said, joining her at the window. The councils received applications from every major racing school in the galaxy. They all want to learn how humans do it. How we feel it, you mean? Sarah corrected, turning to face the growing crowd in the complex. Among them, she spotted several familiar faces, including High Commander 6 and, surprisingly, Zarkax himself. The former champion had been the first to approach her after the race, his neural interface disabled and his eyes bright with curiosity. "Teach me," he had said simply. "Teach me to feel space the way you do." The ancient materialized beside them, their crystalline form refracting the starlight. "What you have shown us goes beyond racing," they communicated. "Your species' ability to intuitively grasp complex systems without technological assistance, it has implications for everything from navigation to quantum engineering." Sarah nodded, remembering the pure sensation of riding quantum waves through impossible spaces. "We've always been good at finding patterns in chaos. Before we had computers, we had to understand weather patterns to survive, had to read the stars to navigate. Those instincts never went away. We just forgot to trust them. And now?" Richards asked. "Now we remember." Sarah gestured to the gathering crowd. "Look at them. Every species out there developed neural interfaces because they thought organic brains couldn't handle the complexity of hyperspace navigation. But what if they were wrong? What if technology wasn't the answer, but just one possible answer?" Through the viewport, they watched as Zarkax demonstrated to a group of young pilots how to disable their neural interfaces. His movements were less certain now, more organic. more alive. "The Council has a proposal for you," the ancient said. "They wish to establish a permanent academy here, not just for racing, but for all forms of human intuitive navigation and pattern recognition. Your species has something unique to offer the galaxy." Sarah smiled, remembering her first terrifying plunge into quantum space without computer assistance. "We're not better than neural interfaces," she said. "We're just different. Sometimes the oldest solutions are still the best ones." "Speaking of solutions," Richards interjected, "the investigation into the sabotage attempt has concluded. It wasn't rival racers as we suspected. It was a group of AI researchers who feared what your success might mean for their field." "They should have had more faith in their work," Sarah replied. "Technology and instinct aren't enemies. They're just different tools for understanding the universe." She turned to the ancient. "Tell the Council I accept their proposal, but with one condition. The Academy teaches integration, not replacement. Human instinct working alongside alien technology, not against it." The ancient's form pulsed with approval. "A wise approach. The future lies not in choosing between organic and artificial solutions, but in understanding when each is most appropriate." As if to emphasize the point, a new group of students entered the complex, humans and aliens together, some with neural interfaces, some without. All of them eager to learn what each approach could teach them about the fundamental nature of speed in space. "You know," Sarah said, watching them gather around her championship pod, "there's an old Earth saying, 'Life finds a way.' Maybe that's what we really proved out there in the quantum storm. That no matter how advanced our technology becomes, there's still something extraordinary about the solutions that evolution spent billions of years perfecting." She placed her hand on the viewport, feeling the subtle vibrations of the ships launching and landing outside. In the distance, the quantum debris field shimmered with potential, waiting for the next generation of pilots to learn its rhythms and patterns. "The galaxy's about to remember something it had forgotten," she continued. "That sometimes the most sophisticated computer isn't the one we build in a lab, but the one we built through millions of years of adapting, surviving, and learning to dance with the impossible." The ancient's presence touched her mind one last time. "And what do you think they will remember most about the human who taught them this lesson?" Sarah watched as a young Zix-Tai pilot successfully completed their first neural-free navigation sequence, their scales shimmering with joy at the pure, unfiltered sensation of flight. "They won't remember me," she said. "They'll remember what humanity showed them, that in a universe of infinite possibilities, sometimes the best way forward is to trust the instincts that got us to the stars in the first place." Outside, the twin suns of Alpha Centauri painted the quantum debris field in colors that no computer could fully analyze, but that every organic brain could feel. And in that light, humans and aliens together began to remember what it meant to truly fly, not with their machines, but with their hearts and souls, and the pure, primal joy of dancing with the stars themselves.